Good afternoon, everyone. This is Osalind Carrington. I am the CEO of the Guyana Economic Development Trust. I want to welcome you to our afternoon event. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Uh, as I mentioned, my name is Osalind Carrington. I am the CEO of the Guyana Economic Development Trust. On behalf of my guests and colleagues, welcome to our program, Caribbean Resilience, Planning for Post-Pandemic Economic Recovery. I want to start off by acknowledging our participants. I'm pretty sure that people will be rolling in as we get started. But I want to again acknowledge that we have participants from Trinidad, Guyana, Jamaica, Antigua, Dominica, the Bahamas, Haiti, Puerto Rico, Martinique, Guadeloupe, Grenada, Barbados, Suriname, Canada, the UK, and the US. So I think we've just about covered all of certainly, and of course, I think I did say Puerto Rico, most of the English-speaking Caribbean. So big up yourselves. Thank you for coming. Today, we are commemorating Caribbean American Heritage Month here in the US. This is over a 10-year-old event or acknowledgement of our presence and contributions here in the United States. So it's very nice to have this. So because we have a very full program, I'd like to get to it. So again, thank you for coming and thank you to our guests. Let me briefly introduce my guests. So first, let me introduce the moderator. Her name is Rosalind McClymont. Rosalind is the executive editor of the Network Journal, a very popular publication here in the States. Also like to introduce Ms. Lizra Fabian. She is the chairperson of the Network of Caribbean Chambers of Commerce, or CARICHAM, and also the executive director of the Dominica Association of Industry and Commerce. I'd also like to introduce Ms. Ingrid Riley. Ingrid is the founder of Rebel Girl Media. She is a strategist and also someone who is very well steeped in technology in the region. And last but by no means least, I'd like to introduce Dr. Justin Ram. He is the CEO of GSEC and former Director of Economics for the Caribbean Development Bank. Welcome to all of you. We're honored to have you. Thank you. So next, I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping, if you don't mind. We may, in fact, as a first order of business, go over the hour that was allotted for this event. It's going to be a very robust conversation. We're very excited to have it. But I do want to say that Ms. Fabian has another obligation, another commitment. So we are likely to be saying goodbye to her at the top of the hour. So I just wanted to say that out of the gate. Also, many of you submitted questions. Those that were submitted have been worked into this discussion. So there is no separate Q&A. We will also be recording, we are recording this event, so if by any chance there's someone you know would be interested in seeing it, there'll be plenty of opportunity for us to, for you to do that. We will send you the link. Lastly, you will receive a survey about this event, about today's session. Please do complete it. We're going to use that to help improve and enhance this type of program that we plan to do going forward. All righty, so without further ado and with regard to everyone's time, we're going to get started. All right, so I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Guyana Economic Development Trust. As your host, my aim is to set the table for our discussion. The Guyana Economic Development Trust is an accelerator, an incubator and an accelerator supporting science and technology startups in the Caribbean. We are focused in 3 areas. We have an innovation prize, or essentially a means of supporting innovation. We are engaged in workforce development by providing training for startup founders and enterprise development, which is championing startup growth. And specifically, the services we offer are the Guyana or the Innovation Prize, which grants pre-seed funding to viable and scalable ideas that are born from research in the areas of science and technology, specifically. We have another initiative called Founder Coach, which supports our Innovation Prize Venture Fellows to really help enhance outcomes of their work in the year that they commit to us to bring their ideas to fruition and to market. Not to fruition, they're actually MVPs or minimum viable products, but to bring them to market. We also have another service called Executive Volunteer Corps, which is newer, and this connects U.S. experts, many of whom are from the diaspora, with startups to accelerate their growth, and conferences, which is what you're participating today. We offer thought leadership in areas that relate to Caribbean development. So this is in essence what we do. We are powered, I'd like, how back in the day when technology ideas would come to the fore, it would say some product or idea powered by, and it'd be some technology in the background. Well, that's us. Our programming, our services, everything we do is powered by the diaspora of the Caribbean. And that's a pretty exciting and important point that we'll come back to as we go through this presentation. Remittances in the Caribbean totaled about $12 billion in US, $12 billion in 2018. And that's significant. Where is that coming from? That is coming from the fact that the Caribbean diaspora in the United States, according to the US Census, is about 4.4 million people. And that's mostly folks are coming from the Dominican Republic and Cuba. So that's 2.4 million of that number. So 2 million, which is quite conservative, of us are those who are on this call. But we already know that. We sort of know that. What we don't know are things like 55% of us are represented in categories like, in terms of employment, management, sciences, business, arts, and services, and those sorts of professions. So there's a healthy professional class of diaspora, Caribbean diaspora here in the United States. And that probably is what is accounting for this 12 billion US dollars of inflows into the region in 2018. I automatically have a question of sort of what was done with that. And that's, for later discussion and possibly even a little bit today. The other thing that's important to note, and we'll get back to these slides towards the end, so you'll get to see this. Tourism makes up a significant part of the Caribbean economy. It's the largest share, close to about 14%. That's the largest in the world, actually. The regional GDP comes from tourism. And it's the largest employer in the region. So unsurprisingly, we are vulnerable to the types of shocks that occur when there is a pandemic or or weather shocks and the like. So resiliency is going to be a very important discussion today, given how collectively, regionally dependent we are on tourism and remittances. We're vulnerable. That's the bottom line. And so COVID is really going to be has had and will continue to have a significant impact in the region. So setting the table with those facts related to our dependence on two very big things, most of which is driven by people outside of the region. I'm going to now turn it over to our moderator, Rosalind, who will take it from here and dig deeper into this based on the setting of the table that I've just done. So we look forward to your participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Osleen. Good afternoon, visitors, attendees to this conference. Let's dig right in. We've got this pandemic sweeping the globe, and we know that there are dire predictions of economic disruption in the Caribbean. We're small islands. We're going to suffer really, really hard. Does that have to be? Aren't there pockets of opportunity that we may be able to wisely exploit so that we don't suffer the worst case scenarios of this pandemic, of this economic downturn? Now, for the purposes of this webinar, we're talking about resilience. Does that just mean recovery, going back to strengthening the norms that are already in place, or are we looking at transformation, going beyond what already exists, what we can strengthen, but then a transformational thinking that will allow us to thrust forward and not just be there to maintain what was there in the past? The other thing, is there really a regional strategy to engage the diaspora, those of us living outside who are originally from the region? Is there a regional strategy, a thoughtful one, that would engage the diaspora in the Caribbean's economic recovery, its resilient, and its forward growth? We've got on our panel, as you heard, we've got a techie person, we've got an economist, policy person, and we've got an entrepreneurial specialist. So let's begin with Lisra Fabienne. You may have to leave early, so let's begin with you. My first question. I've always heard that there is a small number of families that control the economies of the different countries in the Caribbean. Is this true? I've heard that these families are so locked into the banking system, the financial system. They're the ones that really give the green light on projects, whether from the diaspora or locally, that need to go ahead. They will give the green light. Is this really true? And if it is, what can we do about it? How can we change this?
Thank you so much for having me at this very important discussion on Caribbean resilience. And I think this question is a very important one. First of all, I would like to make mention of the organization that I represent, which is CARICHAM. CARICHAM is a network of chambers of commerce across 21 countries, 20 countries in the region, 21 chambers. And this represents over 90,000 businesses, which includes MSMEs across the region. CARICHAM is an organization that seeks to have a platform to advocate on behalf of these small businesses, these MSMEs, including all sizes of businesses. We also advocate for the businesses in addition to creating a platform where businesses can be connected to each other. But importantly with this question, it shows that in coming together, we have a greater voice. From my experience, I've not seen where a few persons control the economy. I think that in lobbying and coming together as a unified group, this creates a platform where businesses are able to engage the government. So we could see on policies, businesses are able to come together as a grouping through representation to lobby with the government, to be able to advocate not just with the government, but with other key stakeholders in order to help with the resilience that we are speaking about and sustainability of our MSME sector. So all in all, I would say, no, this is not accurate. There may be some businesses who are quite proactive in their approach to speaking with different partners, but we see within the Caribbean region where businesses are able to come together as a grouping, whether it's through the chamber or other business support organizations, we see that these businesses can get good value with the banks, with the government, and with other stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So Justin, what then are some of the opportunities that we're looking at? Some of the opportunities that can be exploited as we move into the post-pandemic era?
Okay, so I want to say thank you very much for having me on the discussion, and it's a very important one. When we look at where the Caribbean has been, the Caribbean has always been in a vulnerable state. We have seen that most recently as it relates to the environmental vulnerabilities that we have. But now with the impact of COVID-19, we also recognize that we have significant health vulnerabilities, but even more importantly, we know that we have the significant economic vulnerabilities. The problem in the Caribbean is that anytime something happens, we seem to develop to have these challenges impact us in a negative way, in the worst possible way. And that really just means that we are highly vulnerable, and we need to think about how we turn our vulnerabilities into investable opportunities. So what is actually required here? I think the real opportunity has to lie in there. When I think about how vulnerable we are, we have to think about this in four main areas. One is certainly on the macroeconomic front and what the government does, how it balances its accounts and actually starts to save. So I think there's a real opportunity for us, for governments to start putting aside money for that rainy day. Now, secondly, I think with respect to growth, we really need to start focusing on private sector-led growth. We need to now ensure that our business environment is such that the private sector becomes the engine of growth. And so the governments now need to consider themselves as facilitators of growth and allowing the private sector. So there's a great opportunity in us trying to move up the global rankings of doing business. Right now, on average, we're ranked about 125 out of about 190 countries. And that's not good enough when you think that some places in conflict around the world have a better doing business environment than the average Caribbean country. Thirdly, I think there's a real opportunity for us to invest in the equalization of opportunities. As you know now, there's been a real anger globally, and this has been going on for the last couple of years, that people want greater equality. And I think now in the Caribbean is an opportunity for us to invest in the equality of opportunity. Now, having that, for example, giving students good access to quality education, no matter from which station you come from in life, and more importantly, having access to good healthcare and perhaps transport, that must be married with a competitive economy. Because once you have provided someone with the access to equal opportunities, they must be able to turn those opportunities into tangible rewards. And this is why I say it's so important for us to build a competitive economy. And then finally, I would say we have real opportunities to invest in resilient infrastructure. And that resilient infrastructure must be able to withstand the effects of hurricanes or other types of natural events that frequent our region from time to time. And let me just say there are some cross-cutting themes that need to be considered with this. While we're doing all of this, we have to ensure that we're doing this in a gender equal way to make sure that no one is left behind. We have to also ensure that we're doing all of this in a digitalized way. No more must we build our economy on a paper or on doing things in the old-time ways. We must think about this in a digitalized way. And finally, I should say that governments now have a real opportunity to fine-tune how they implement projects. And I think if I want to say anything here, we can talk and talk and talk, but one of the major issues that we have in the Caribbean is that we simply do not implement well. And so, as you know, from year in and year out, we come up with very lovely, glossy, medium-term development strategies or vision documents. But when you look back, many of the things that were so well articulated within those glossy pages have not been implemented. And that is simply because we don't pay enough attention as to how you go about implementing things. And then I should say one last thing here. How we go about financing our development is critical. It is high time for us to consider, as everyone is calling for greater equality of opportunity, that we consider ways that we do financing that gives the ordinary person an equity stake in their economy. It is time for us to democratize investments. Everybody must now have a stake in the economy as it goes forward. And that includes not only those who are living within these countries, but how could we also get the diaspora to start putting some of their resources? So some of those remittances that are coming back to us, how can we get some of those remittances going into investments so that at the end of the day, even the diaspora can have some ownership of what is going on back here in the Caribbean.
Thank you so much, Justin. You've brought up a whole number of issues, but first I want to go to Ingrid in terms of digitizing. Ingrid, tell us a bit how technology can help to bring about this equalization of opportunity that he spoke about, and also going about recovery and growth in a digitalized way. Tell us what technology can do for all this.
I'm just pretty excited about the opportunities that we have here and now. We've had it for around 15 years in the region in terms of trying to understand how do we leverage this beautiful thing called the internet, these beautiful technologies like mobile and blockchain and AI. How do we use these things to put the Caribbean on the global digital economy? And I've always had pretty much one thesis, and it is pretty much this. Every single Caribbean nation has something that it does best and does better than any other nation in the world. We need to figure out as Caribbean nations individually what it is that we have a unique and distinct, an unfair advantage in, hone into that, own it, and then pair it with different technologies that may exist already, and use that to basically cement our unique and unfair advantage in the regional digital economy and also the global economy. I've been working in the tech ecosystem, tech startup ecosystem for the past 15 years. I'm a tech entrepreneur myself, and my brand Silicon Carib has been working to be as an ecosystem builder using blogs, events, collaborations with development agencies and organizations to basically hone in on entrepreneurs who have a particular way of thinking. They're solving their local problems. They're trying to solve regional problems that may, of course, have applications to the global market as well. And so for me, now that we are in this space again, where we are forced to stop talking and now forced to actually take massive action right now, with COVID, with Black Lives Matter, with supposedly a pending, L-curve recession, we're now forced to be even more introspective and to be even more, if I call it radical or innovative and unconventional in how we think about digital, how we think about the digital age and our place and our role there. And for me, my thesis has always been the Caribbean. Justin had mentioned in terms of why we're very good at coming up with fantastic documents and strategies and everything, but we're weak in terms of implementation. And having seen some of that myself over the past 12 years working in the tech startup ecosystem, the simple thing is that it's our mindset. First of all, I don't think we value who we are and what we have, both as a Caribbean, as a region, but also individually as Caribbean, as individual Caribbean nations. We just need to hone in to what it is that we do best. Jamaica has an unfair advantage when it comes to our cultural, we're a cultural powerhouse. Trinidad has its own thing. Grenada has its own thing. Martinique has its own thing. Haiti has its own thing. What exactly is that? What is it that we can zone in, pair with technology, and use that to leverage to our advantage for regional success and also global, digital economy success? So that's kind of how I'm thinking it. And I'm leaving it up to the entrepreneurs. The innovations and the strategies will not come from technocrats, will not come from policymakers. Their role, in my estimation, is to create and facilitate an environment where it is easy to start your business. It is easy to fail, and it doesn't have a massive amount of impact on you. It is easy for investors, wherever they are in the world, in the region, to actually invest in your business and for it to flow with ease and grace where that is concerned. That, I believe, I'll just leave it right there right now. But that's kind of how I'm thinking, that this is a fantastic time for the region to be internal, own its uniqueness, pair it with the beautiful opportunities that are right at our fingertips now with the digital age, and really kind of set ourselves up for success in the next couple of years and beyond.
Thank you, Ingrid. I've never seen a Jamaican who does not value himself as a Jamaican or that nation as paradise. I'm married to one, and it's always paradise, paradise, paradise.
Of course, without question.
But going back to you, Lizra, we're talking about equalizing opportunity, digitalizing. What about our informal sector? You're involved with the entrepreneurial sector. You see the businesses, small, medium-sized, micro businesses. The informal sector, you have all of these little micro businesses. Tell us how they can be brought into the formal sector, perhaps, or how they can be harnessed, that energy in the informal sector, to push forward our the overall private sector, and expand our growth.
Okay, so thank you for that question. And our MSME sector comprises of about 80% of the business sector within the Caribbean region. So there are lots of small businesses in all different types of sectors. I think when we visit the Caribbean and we interact with different businesses, all these small businesses, from the vendor on the side of the road to the tour operator, to the bus driver, to so many different businesses within the Caribbean, help to support this MSME sector that is very important in helping our Caribbean resilience. Because we also believe that if these businesses are not resilient, these informal businesses are also not resilient, then our Caribbean would not experience the resilience that we so desire. When we look at what is important for these businesses to thrive, there's advocacy on their behalf. It's very important because, as was mentioned before, as individual businesses, they are unable to say or cause change to take place within the policy landscape and in different areas. There's also a need for increased access to finance, because we see that a lot of these small businesses, a lot of these informal businesses may not necessarily put or have the financial literacy that's important to be able to access formalized available capital. So one of the things that we did recently was have an MSME financial management training. And as we're operating virtually, it's a virtual financial management training to help our businesses to understand the important aspects, such as record keeping, starting up their business, and even the accounting aspects, so that they know what is necessary to improve their business so that they can access financing that would be available. But also for the financing that is supposedly available, we want to ensure that they are best tailored to the needs of these businesses, because that will help them to be more resilient once they have access to capital to be able to make the right decisions for their business. We also see for the informal sector that it's important to have training to improve the capacity of the business in terms of the staff, those who support that venture, but also for the management of the business. Many persons think they're good ideas, and in the Caribbean we are rich with ideas, rich with so many other resources that we could build on and mix the ideas with the resources to have a business. But it's also important to ensure that we have the right training to be able to use whatever resources we have to have the greatest business possible. But what was mentioned before, what Ingrid mentioned in terms of the digitization of the businesses, which is important, is finding other means to be able to trade and to transact. If we have to wait for persons to only come to our countries, come all the way to Dominica so that they can interact with our small businesses, then that makes it very difficult for the businesses to expand and to reach as many customers as possible. So being able to use the digital platforms, whether through B2B, business to business transactions, or business to customers transaction, would be important in helping our MSMEs and our informal sector to grow and to also become more resilient. And one of the experiences we had after Hurricane Maria was that it was very difficult for some businesses to be able to start up and to even transact or interact with their customers. And we see with COVID as well, many businesses had to shut their doors. But with digital platforms and digital services, we see this can really propel our MSME sector. Finally, I would like to mention business support services. Without business support, which looks after our small businesses and really advocate for them and push them to the front, look for opportunities to leverage for these small businesses and our informal sectors, I think that really helps with enhancing the resilience of our MSMEs and our informal sector.
This takes us back to what Justin said about the financial infrastructure, the access to capital. Now, we know that in the informal sector and even in the formal sector, we have traditional means of raising capital. We call it SUSU, Guyana, you call it box, and all, you know, that system. In the United States at one time, the banks got wind of what's going on in the Caribbean community in terms of SUSU. And I remember seeing signs on some of these banks, we accept SUSU funds. That is, they wanted the banker to go and put all the SUSU money into the bank. That was an attempt to harness all of this informal way of raising capital. Justin, tell us how, or give us your thoughts on how we can work with these traditional, these informal ways of raising capital and bring it into the banking system or into a more innovative banking system.
Thanks very much. I think that's a really important question, because this is what I'm saying in terms of we need to turn our financial architecture on its head. And perhaps now we need to start using some of these traditional means of financing that we have traditionally had with us. Now, I think that falls squarely within the idea of democratizing investments, whereby we are saying, let's try to give everyone an opportunity to own a stake. So we know, for example, that we use these SUSU systems. The way how it worked was that everyone would put in some money, let's say at the particular point in time, and then one person within that group is then able to use the money for what they needed to do at that point in time, and then the cycle just simply continues. Is it possible for us now to consider utilizing that same type of approach for building equity into small and medium-sized businesses who need capital to allow them to grow? Can we consider the development of some type of a micro stock exchange that can do exactly that? And I think this is what we have to consider. We have to consider how we can get anyone with as little money as they can to be able to buy stakes in some new ventures, and to even go beyond that to buy stakes in government capital. And here's how I think it could work as it relates to government capital. Currently, as you know, with the COVID-19, and I was just reading a latest IMF report today, which says that the contraction in the global economy is likely to be much worse than they were even predicting back in April. It also means that the government debt is likely to be increased quite significantly. Now, for us to try to reflate our economies, governments are going to have to spend. But as you know, in the Caribbean, many of our countries are highly indebted already. So why do we want to go down the debt route to reinflate our economies? We can do that through an equity route. We can say, the ordinary person, you have savings currently in the bank, which are earning for you very, very little rate of return. How about you provide that money to us, let's say as a government or some other intermediary, and the government then spends that money building out our sound infrastructure, or perhaps investing in some type of small or medium-sized enterprises, providing them with the capital. In return for doing that, we can say, we will give you an equity stake in perhaps the government investments, or even an equity stake in the small or medium-sized enterprises. What that then does is that is no longer a debt of the government, which is a good thing. We are then able to reinflate our economies through the stimulus, and it gives these persons who had their money sitting in the bank accounts earning very low rates of return an opportunity to earn dividends based on these investments, and in turn it gives them an equity stake. Now immediately that sends all sorts of the correct incentives into the economy, whereby everyone now has a stake to ensure that this economy remains resilient and remains on a good growth path, because it means that overall their investments would also be better performing if the whole economy is performing much better. So I think this is what we need to do, to use our traditional approaches to how we finance, but let's go a step forward and say to the ordinary person, I'm going to give you an equity stake in this economy. either directly in government projects, whereby I'm saying, okay, as you lend the government money, I'm not going, government will not pay you back, but I will give you an equity stake, for example, in our airports, our ports, or other public infrastructure that can give you a return. And similarly, this money can also go into micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. And hopefully those businesses with this new capital investment will also grow. And now those who have invested, the small person who has invested, has a direct stake in wanting those businesses to succeed, because they also want to see a good rate of return on their money as well. So it's really time for us to look at those opportunities. And I think the time has come for us to consider doing this all through digital platforms. Because if we use digital platforms, it means that our transaction costs are a lot less. It means that everyone who has a phone, for example, can have a custody wallet on their phone, and they can manage their investments from the tip of their thumb on their phone. And that is what we need to consider now. I think that the time has come for us to look at this opportunity to give everyone equity stake using our traditional forms, but turning it into on its head by doing it all digitally as well.
See, you and Ingrid are really on the same page with this digitizing and the technology. But here's a question from one of our registrants. The registrant says, the Caribbean, I'm sorry, let me get to it here, talks about population size, that because of our population size, we cannot grow. Essentially, that's the gist of it. Population size is directly related to economic growth. Ultimately, if you remove all of the variables of politics and propaganda, the root cause of lack of economic growth is a low population. Your thoughts on that? I mean, just as a background, I look at places like Iceland, all of these, there are lots of countries that have fewer people, that have smaller populations than some of our Caribbean countries. And yet there's one that depends uniquely on tourism and has one of the highest GDPs in the world. Another one depends uniquely on the fishing industry and has another very high GDP. Ingrid, how can technology mitigate this notion of low population and growth, economic growth?
You know, Rosalind, thank you for playing perfectly into my hands, because the examples you just gave a while ago links to what I said in my opening, which is each nation found something that they had an unfair advantage in. They thought that they were pretty unique in what they're going to do, and then they doubled down on it, and they went just full speed ahead with that. And when we come to technology, let's even just talk about Silicon Valley, which has been one of the bastions of things that are happening, especially in the United States and globally. Let's use it for an example. Silicon Valley is a small place in California, around 4 million people. But there's a concentration of talent, of ideas, of a support system that allows them to account for almost half of the companies that are on the NASDAQ right now. And of course, that accounts for companies that we always talk about, the Facebooks and the Googles. So I use it only as an example, again, to point back to the whole thing. You know, what are the Caribbean nations thinking about in terms of what we're going to double down? Barbados has decided that they want to be the blockchain capital of the Caribbean. Trinidad is deciding right now, based on what is in terms of activities on the ground, in terms of startups, that they want to solve that never-ending problem of online payments. So we have WePay, right? Jamaica decides that, okay, well, we're a cultural superpower. We need to double down even some more on creating content, with his music content, all different kinds of content, and feed that to the world and maybe do that. And of course, we have cannabis and of course, sports. And that's what I'm talking about. How do we zone in on who we are, that is unique, what we do best, what we have an unfair advantage, and how can we put that out there? And it's not a matter of just digitization in terms of, oh, well, I have a company, let me go online. We have to think there's a difference between doing digital and being digital. And being digital means that we think about the internet first. We think about the mobile first, because we are living in a world where everybody lives on this. We live on this. And the fact of the matter is, how are we aligning our businesses or thinking, the problems that we're seeking to solve, the unique talents that we have, the unique infrastructure that we have, the unique, ways of innovating, the unique ways in which we go about our daily business. How are we using all of that, right? And pairing it with the existing technologies, or even creating technologies to facilitate all those unique things, and then feed it to our country, to the region, and to the world. So, again, it is a fantastic time for us to acknowledge that we as a region, we have wonderful things going for us, and it is really time for us to move away from change the Caribbean narrative beyond the beach. And we are too dependent, as we all know, on tourism. And we've been talking about diversifying our economies since I was 2. And so I think now we have this fantastic opportunity with all this is going on. There's even more of a level playing field. There is even more opportunities for us to learn fast, to run fast, to execute fast, and to take our slice of a global digital economy.
Thank you, Ingrid. And just to that point, if you look at East Africa, if you look at many of the countries in Africa, but East Africa in particular, where they have come up with all of these technologies to address local problems, locally developed economies, technologies to address local problems.
Absolutely.
And let me tell you, speaking of Jamaica, there is a young Jamaican in Uganda who has come up with an app, right? He lives in Uganda, my favorite African country. He lives in Uganda, and he's come up with an app, sort of like Fresh Direct, that delivers. It's a transportation app that delivers food, right? Because of the COVID pandemic, there's been a lockdown in Uganda. And so this app just delivers food to various, you can order online and you can deliver. Of course, he's looking for investment, and he's doing it in East Africa. But I want to go back to another issue or another question from one of our registrants. And speaking of finding that uniqueness in each country, one person asks, how can Guyana work along with the Caribbean nations to achieve a post-pandemic recovery plan for all? In other words, how can Guyana's agricultural potential factor into this? And if I may add, its oil potential. Lizra, can you speak to that for us? How can Guyana use its agricultural and oil potential to work along with the entire Caribbean?
Okay, well, I think that's a great question, especially now that oil is so prevalent in Guyana, and I would say for Suriname as well. That's also a hot topic there. I think, as we mentioned, integration and regional integration, it's important that we are able to leverage the advantages that we have in the different countries to work along with Guyana so that our region as a whole can benefit. I think one of the points that was mentioned by Ingrid was seeing what each country, and I'm thinking of it as a region right now, seeing what each country have that's going for them. What advantage do we have? And for Guyana, it's oil right now, and that's an amazing thing. I think that being able to leverage this and then use these resources, the capital, the extra capital, it's a way to attract other investors within the region to support the growth of oil in Guyana. I also think that it would create more opportunities, and there will be more capital that's available to also strengthen other linkages, such as trade linkages, logistics, and see how some of the other resources, the products that are manufactured in Guyana that we can use this to help to feed the rest of the Caribbean. And then in using that, we also spoke about how can we match the demand or the supply from Guyana with the demand from the rest of the region, and not just export from Guyana to the rest of the Caribbean, but how can we also find out what's available in the rest of the other Caribbean countries and transport that back to Guyana. So what we have been discussing and what we think that could be important is leveraging logistics, transportation, our people, our skills that would be available within the Caribbean to help to support this growth of oil in Guyana, and also using this opportunity now to leverage other sectors in Guyana and the rest of the Caribbean. So I think it would be a great opportunity if we could leverage the oil to be able to boost other sectors within the Caribbean and use that opportunity to be able to ensure that our Caribbean is more sustainable. We depend less on resources out of the region, but also to build each of our countries together with Guyana.
Thank you so much. But Justin, is there an appetite? Is there a real appetite for integration? We've been working on integration for such a long time. Why isn't it happening? What's especially at a time like this when it's even more indicated?
Yes, I think there's always an appetite for integration, but unfortunately, some voices were louder than others. And I think what we have to consider now is that in order to move forward within our integration movement, we have to consider how we do that differently. It is time for us to say, for those who are willing to move together in a regional integration movement, let us move together with those who are willing, sort of like the coalition of the willing, and then allow others when they are ready to come and join. Because what happened in the past, if you remember with federation, was that unfortunately there was some incorrect mathematics that occurred when we all know of the very familiar phrase that 1 from 10 left 0, and that was quite unfortunate. The Federation should have moved ahead with the 9 countries that were willing to at the time. And then we said, if you want to join later on, then come on board. I think that is what we have to say now, rather than trying to go for full consensus on these types of things. Let us move forward with those who are willing. Now, right now, there's a great opportunity for us to consider regional integration. And it comes back to that question that you asked about population size. Yes, on an individual country basis, we might have small populations. And in fact, when you look out to 2100, a number of our countries are forecast to have significant population declines. For example, Jamaica is forecast to decline by 50%, Trinidad by about 28%, Barbados by about 10%. Now, if you are thinking about really, we need to consider the Caribbean as a single economic space, because when you add up all of these small population sizes together, you then come up with quite a significant market whereby, oh my gosh, imagine if you're an entrepreneur who now can operate in a market of 6 million people, or if we, of course, if we include Haiti there, a market of 16 to 18 million people, rather than operating in a market of 100,000 people. It means that your business ever has a greater opportunity to be more viable. And given that everything that we've heard already on this conversation, it's going to be easier for us to do that within this digital age. Now, I think the time has come for us to start building up this integration movement from the bottom up. And what do I mean there? We really need that more of our people get to know each other better. I think that it's high time for us to consider how we make the movement of people a lot easier. That I think we should consider not having any restrictions on the free movement of labor. I also think that we have to look at how people move around. How costly is it? You look at the cost of airfare, for example, within the region, typically about 40 to even 60% of that airfare is made up of taxes and fees. And should we say to our governments, instead of trying to collect all of those taxes there, why not encourage our people to move around? And then when they come to your country and spend, you could probably recoup those lost tax revenues through VAT receipts or hotel occupancy taxes or things like that. That I think is very important for us to consider, because we're more at the bottom level, more at the individual level, we are able to get to know one another. And for those of us who've had that privilege, know that we really are not different at all. There's no need for us to be afraid of anybody in the Caribbean. We're all very similar. And our cultures actually add so much to one another. This is what we really need to be considering. And then finally, that's about free movement of our people and of course the costs associated with that. But we also have to consider how do we move our goods and services around. We need to make that a lot easier. And I think here is where governments around the region must consider how they can facilitate all of this. And part of that facilitation is to say, let us start lowering taxes and fees so that the ordinary person, the private sector, can get on to do what they need to do, to be entrepreneurial, to grow our economies. And ultimately, once the economies are growing, governments will also start to receive much more tax revenues to allow them to do the things that we are doing. So I think again here, I can't harp on this enough. We need to turn our overall thinking about what we need to do to build resilience in the Caribbean. We need to turn it on its head, because what we have been doing for so long has not served us well enough. Some aspects have served us well, but many of the aspects have not. And it's high time for us to consider moving towards thinking of the Caribbean as a single economic space. And I can say that anyone who is running a business in the region would welcome that full-heartedly. Imagine if I am starting a business in Barbados and I got through the regulatory hurdles to do that in Barbados. It means that I should be able to do that in Jamaica or Dominica, St. Lucia, Trinidad, because now we have harmonized our regulatory frameworks as well. That is what business are actually calling for. And it is time for us to start listening from the bottom and then implementing those things at the top. The top-down approach isn't working for us as well as it should. We need to consider a bottom-up approach to how we consider integration.
Justin, who's listening to you in the Caribbean? I mean, is there a critical mass of like-minded thinkers that you work with, or that is making an impact on the mindset of our countries, of the leadership of our various countries?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good question. And I think we have a great opportunity in the region now. We have some leaders who are really aware and are really progressive in their thinking and want us to move there. I think top of that list, and I hope she doesn't mind me calling her out, but I think the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, is very, very progressive in the way she thinks about these things, and it is time for us as people to start supporting that type of thinking, because it ultimately requires good leadership to get us there. And I have to say that Prime Minister Mia Mottley has been driving that particular initiative, and we really need to rally behind her. Now, to come back to your question, I think it's a very important one, because it is high time that our school curriculum, this must be one of the #1 subjects that we start to teach, because that's where it starts. We have to start teaching everyone within all of our students, all of our young people need to fully understand Caribbean history, understand that where we've all come from, and understand that we are much better together. That must be taught, just as everyone who goes through the school system must understand how to multiply and divide and to write a coherent sentence. They must also be fully in tune with regional integration and why that is important for us as a region, economically, socially, and also environmentally, because it's important, when you think about it. If, for example, when a small country like Dominica is impacted by a Hurricane Maria back in 2017, building resilience also means that people need to be able to move freely to somewhere else in the Caribbean quite easily, where they don't have restrictions, where children can go to school in that place, where their parents can find work quite easily, until Dominica is able to then accept their people back. And then it also means that anyone in the Caribbean can simply go to Dominica and help build up Dominica. This is how you build resilience. Every time you see, for example, a storm coming through and a storm is about to hit the United States of America, you look on the news and you can see long lines of traffic. People are able to leave where the storm is going to hit. We need to have that same type of resilience in the Caribbean that allows our people to move temporarily or even permanently, depending on what they want to do, and then perhaps return to their countries. So I'm saying this to make the point that integration is good for economics. It's good for society in terms of the social, because now we're able to get people to move to where they want to work. So if, for example, I really want to be an oil engineer and I might be living in a country where tourism is the mainstay, well, I can go to Guyana and work if I want to do that. But it's also good environmentally, because now we give people an opportunity to move if their country is hit by a disaster. And it is not a matter of if our countries will be hit by disasters, it's a matter of when. And we really need to consider from that point of view that regional integration is also good for environmental vulnerability and to help us build resilience as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin. And as we're emphasizing the word resilience, let's look traditionally, or which sectors in the Caribbean traditionally have been resilient, which businesses, if we think about it, have survived through the years and are still doing well. Lizra, can you talk to that about the traditionally resilient businesses in the Caribbean?
Well, when we look at the businesses that have been resilient in the Caribbean, even referring to some of the points that Justin made, some of these businesses who can easily integrate within the rest of the Caribbean, who are able to move as freely as possible. And I think this alludes to some of the sectors that we generally enjoy as a Caribbean region. I think businesses within culture, entertainment, media, and even sports. These sectors, I would say, have been quite resilient. When we look at the sport product from Jamaica, I would say that has been quite resilient, and building a cadre of athletes who are able to shine all around the world. I also think that when we look at our entertainment industry, we see a number of amazing examples of resilience, and also persons who are able to not just be hit with the different challenges that we are faced with, but to use these challenges as a stepping stone. I think all of us have been exposed to our artists who have used the internet now to host virtual shows, virtual concerts, and some of them are still able to generate revenue. And they are also leveraging the digital space in order to gain this revenue. So I think looking at these sectors, we can learn a lot from them. Being easy, well, you being able to pivot quickly by seeing opportunities, seeing new ways of reaching new clients, and taking hold of the opportunities that are available regionally to be able to push their businesses forward. But also, I think these sectors that have also thrived, they have been able to partner with other persons within the rest of the region in order to showcase their resilience and in order to thrive as best as possible. But I just want to make one point that when we look at resilience, it is being able to bounce back as quickly as possible. And when we look at an elastic band, it can stretch as much as possible. Many different challenges can come, but being able to still be successful, still be able to reach that customer base, still being able to raise revenue, still being able to support the advancement of the country, not just financially, but also through the information we share, the example we show, and how we motivate others to do the same.
Lizra, and going to you, speaking of support, Ingrid, do we have enough public sector support for technological innovation in the region? I mean, I took a couple of my grandchildren to Guyana a couple of years ago, and there was a wonderful robotics competition that we attended. And I know that there are certain events, you've been part of these coming out of in Jamaica across the region. Are our governments putting enough energy, enough support, verbally also, not just financially and otherwise? Are we getting enough support for technological innovation among tech entrepreneurs, private sector? Go ahead, Ingrid.
It has definitely improved over time, and I've been in the ecosystem development side of the things for the past 12 years, and I have worked with ministers, especially in Jamaica. I advised a couple of ministers. So in doing that, I have learned that the government's role in ecosystem development and in supporting tech innovation lies primarily in policy and legal framework. They have no business telling entrepreneurs what they should and shouldn't be doing. No technocrats should be attempting to do that. Government's role is to say, are these entrepreneurs able to protect their ideas? Are these entrepreneurs able to register their businesses quickly, pivot quickly? Are they able to fail without massive fallout? Are they able to access capital both from the formal banking system or from angel investors or just informal investors, so the angel and VC investors, in a very smooth and efficient way? That, to me, that is a role of government. And so without question, some are doing better than others. I just believe that they should do a lot more. We went through a period where government thought I should be in the business of incubators and accelerators. No, I chaired Startup Jamaica, and I was brought in to turn it around because they had borrowed money from World Bank and they were trying to rationalize things. It did not work. The money was taken elsewhere, politicized and taken elsewhere to do other things. That's what I'm talking about when the government gets involved in trying to play a role in an ecosystem that they should not. For them, government should focus on policy making and legal framework that enables entrepreneurs to simply be themselves and enable investors to simply be themselves. And of course, they can act as a role of champion in terms of, I believe that because of Jamaica's unique position in terms of being a cultural powerhouse, or Trinidad's unique position in doing what it does, that we're going to put some spotlight, we're going to put some marketing money, we're going to put some energy behind it, but still stay out of the way of creators, stay out of the way of entrepreneurs, but just become the facilitator. And if I can just dovetail a little bit on what Israel had said before in terms of the resilience of a specific area, which is media. Across the region, there's just so much white space for innovation in media. And I'm talking about everything, media and entertainment. And she made reference to, during this particular period of time, creators, entrepreneurs were able to pivot from in real life opportunities, not being able to tour, not being able to do things that require you to move somewhere else by doing it online. It's a beautiful space. And it's a massive space for the region because the world is craving Caribbean content. And I don't think we understand how much power we have where that is concerned. And now with digital media and your ability to create a podcast and a blog or whatever it is, we should really lean more into that because we can make a lot of money. We can facilitate a lot of job creation for our creators. And then that money tends to multiply and circulate, not just in the nation, but also in the region. And, that's the reason, I'm focused on digital media myself. Rebel Girl Media is fully about changing the Caribbean narrative beyond the beach. We've been seeing the trends popping out for the last 5 or so years where there's almost like a new Caribbean emerging. They're not waiting on government. They're not waiting on changes of policy. They are creating from the ground up this new Caribbean that is going digital, is becoming more inclusive, and it's embracing its fringes like cannabis and other things. And we're almost like falling in love with ourselves. Look at what the Caribbean millennials are doing online. Please, the digital trends speak to it loudly. And it gives us, I think, an inkling as to where young people are pushing and driving the region, and we should listen to them. The governments should listen to them. The policymakers and the technocrats should listen to them. We all should listen to them and support them in any way, shape, or concern. And that's what we're doing at Rebel Girl Media.
That was very well said. Yes, thank you so much. First of all, I'd like to apologize to the audience for the technical problems we were having with YouTube. So I see that we are hopefully engaging most of the people who had been waiting. So on behalf of my team and myself, please accept my apologies. I'm also wanting to be very mindful of people's time. I do want to keep the conversation going. For those who might have missed it at the beginning, I did say that we would likely go over. It's about 1:06, and so I'd like to continue, but invite two things to occur. The first is I am very keen for all of you to see some slides that Justin had put together because I think they speak very sort of summarily in a sort of summary form about all that we've been saying. What are the issues? How can they be addressed? And what from a financial standpoint, because we all know that capital is king, we can do to help affect some of these very positive things that we're talking about. And then obviously I'd like to wrap up before 1:30. So Rosalind, I'm going to turn it back over to you to finish up with your questions. Everyone's doing such a fantastic job. And I do want to give a little bit of time for Justin, if you're amenable to this, for you to walk through the slides. Our technical person will put them up when you're ready. Just cue, and we can go from there. So just wanted to jump in for a minute. This is
Thank you,
going very
Oslin.
well.
And
Thank
in
you.
fact, I was just about to call on those slides from Justin. We've been anxiously waiting for them. I hear they're great. So are we ready with those?
Okay, well, thanks very much. So it's a great pleasure again. So I'll just go straight to the other slide where I can start presenting on the key areas here. Now, this slide was really just a summary of what I think is important for us to consider building back better, but also how we build resilience. And the title of this slide, I say it's important for us to step back in order to jump better. And I like to refer to the analogy of a long jumper at the Olympics. I have to admit, I don't look at athletics that often, but I always look at at athletics when the Olympics is around. You know, of course, we always have such great Caribbean contingent at those games, and so wonderful to be supporting everyone from the Caribbean there. But when I look at a long jumper, in order for them to jump further before they run down that track, it almost seems as if they're going in the wrong direction. They are pulling back. They are stepping back in order to jump better. And I think what we need to do in the Caribbean is to pull back, step back, run down that track, and it allow us to jump further to perhaps, hopefully, not hopefully, but to get us to win that gold medal. So here on macroeconomic, I've spoken about what is required here. Governments need to build fiscal buffers, but in order to do that, governments have to step back and now allow the private sector to lead on growth. And so we need to have private sector-led growth. We need to look at new trade markets, facilitate regional payments facility using fintech. You know, we had a discussion about this in the 1990s about a single Caribbean currency. I think we should bring that back on the table. But before that, we could have some type of digital Caribbean settlements network that allows us to trade easily amongst ourselves without having to go through foreign banking systems. Human development, I think, is really critical. We need to have good quality education for all. And why do I say that? Because that's how we have to equalize opportunity. It's very important that we understand that nexus between equality of opportunity and productivity and competitiveness, because once you get that opportunity, you need to be able to turn those into tangible rewards by then leaving school or university and going into in a competitive economy. And finally, there's all this whole idea of preparedness with respect to environmental vulnerabilities. Strict building codes are important. How do we develop our insurance markets? What sort of climate and microcredit is required to get small and medium-sized businesses back on their feet after? And then at the bottom of this slide is really just some real cross-cutting things that I think we need to do. You can't do all of this if you're trying to do it on your own. Regional integration is key. Gender equality is the number one. Statistics is important because unless we have good statistics, we really can't tell how much progress we're making. digitalization is there, and then that bee in my bonnet, which is the lack of implementation, is also critical. I look at sustainable society in the middle here. If we don't have equality of opportunity and we don't have a competitive economy, we're going to get negative consequences, whereby we're likely to have antisocial behavior or even citizen insecurity issues occurring. It's important that we give everyone in society that opportunity to have an equal opportunity, because that's critical. And that, I think, governments need to focus on investing in on good education, on health, and perhaps on transport. These are critical areas. And once people have those things and everyone comes out of school with the same level of good quality education, they need to be able to turn that into tangible rewards, either by becoming an employee, or if the economy is very competitive, then we'll have many more people wanting to become entrepreneurs. And that's how that nexus between opportunity and competitiveness is so important. And then on this slide, I'm saying for us to consider doing this, we need to think about innovative finance and things that I've spoken about. Now, as I said, we're very vulnerable. And what tends to happen is that even at the household level or individual level, if you are vulnerable and you go to the bank for a loan, they're going to say, well, your credit score isn't that great, so you can get a loan, but you're going to have to pay for it. Well, if you really think about it, if I want to build resilience, I'm not being incentivized to do so if I have to pay a very high cost of interest to do so. And so I'm saying that the financial architecture needs to be turned on its head, whereby we're saying in order for us to build resilience, we need financing at very low cost. And so what we're saying is that it's important to understand that to build resilience, it is costly, but we need that capital at a very low cost initially. Now, of course, I understand that any investor wants to get a rate of return. What I'm saying here is that when you build resilience, you actually are avoiding a lot of costs in the future, and perhaps also building in greater probability of business continuity, meaning that businesses and the economy is going to be a lot more profitable. And when that profitability increases over time, I'm saying to the investors, here is when you will actually receive your returns. And more importantly, the last point on this slide is to say, let us encourage our citizens, our diaspora, to invest in our countries by giving them that equity stake. And remember I spoke about this equity stake is critical, because at first we can have this as debt, but if the debt is then converted into an equity stake, it means that the government no longer has to pay that debt, but now people now have a stake in their economy, and so they really want the economy to grow, because when the economy grows, when business thrives, then they also see a return on their investments. So we're trying to line up incentives very importantly. So it's about getting finance in there at the correct price while we're vulnerable, and then saying to individuals, our diaspora, invest, and I give you an equity stake, and you will see your returns growing, because now you have actually used your money to help this economy grow. It's costly upfront, but over time you will see the rewards of this. All right, and then the last, this is just a slide here. I think it's an imperative for us to do this digitally, and actually this is what I'm trying to do with my new startup here at GSEC, is for us to allow anyone who has a smart device or a laptop to simply go onto our website and invest in different types of investments. I'm trying to democratize investments through the digital means. So if you can invest as little as $10, or if you can invest $100, or if you're an institutional investor, you can go onto this platform and decide which type of digital bonds I want to buy. Where do I want my money to go? And I'm saying to them, use this platform, because now with the digital platform, we are reducing transaction costs. And on this platform, if you want to trade out and sell your security, you are able to do that quite easily. The whole notion behind this is really now to try to democratize investments. And this will be open to anywhere around the world, but certainly for us in the Caribbean, it's really geared towards getting citizens and residents investing more in their countries and having that equity stake, and also encouraging the diaspora to simply go onto this platform and to do that. And this particular slide speaks to how this can work in reality. And we're only a startup. We're now attempting to do this, And I'm hoping that in a few years that if we that we can make this a reality, because ultimately, in doing this as an entrepreneur, I'm really interested in the developmental outcomes. It's about giving everyone an equity stake in the economy so that they really want to see what's best. And what's important here, I think, also is that it improves governance, because no longer are people going to just simply be passive investors via paying taxes in their economy. They will be active investors and will want to keep their governments and those in charge accountable on a daily basis rather than every 5 years, as the case is in our democracies. So this platform also means that while we democratize investments, savings, and finance, we're also improving governance as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin. Thanks so much. Let me just jump in. Is Lisra still here? Lisra, you had to leave at about 2 o'clock, and perhaps you've gone already. I don't know, but
I'm here.
You're still here? You're having such a good time with us that you can't go?
I have to push back a little bit, so I have a few more minutes.
Okay. So tell us, since you have a few more minutes, I'll put this to you. Are we too dependent? Is our growth, our businesses, our economies, are we too dependent on overseas, on external forces, be it capital, be it influences, any kind?
Well, in some sense of the word, I would say we are dependent, but I would also say that we have been increasing how we utilize the resources that persons are offering us to enhance our economies. I think that we can't do it alone, and within the Caribbean, we need support from other partners. So I think that partnership is key. But in terms of the terms and conditions for engaging this support, what type of support that we ensure that we get, that would determine how resilient we are. I wanted to, at least to be able to show the slide that I had, so at least I could share a call to action of some of the opportunities that are available pre and post COVID as well. And that would also include support from out of the region. This is also important in being able to leverage our diaspora, in being able to support our growth and advancement as a region. And not just our diaspora, but anyone else who wants to support MSME resilience and advancing our small business sector or business sector in the Caribbean. Supporting what Justin just mentioned about the need for equity stake within the Caribbean. That was one of the opportunities that I wanted to share with those who are tuned in today, that there are opportunities to invest in businesses within the Caribbean, whether startups or businesses that are looking at thriving, whether within the digital space or other sectors, to be able to provide the capital for these businesses so that they can thrive. We see at the bottom right-hand side, that's where we have the equity investors and venture capitalists. Many of our businesses may be able or would have to offer up some of the ownership of the business in order to access capital to thrive and to bring the business forth. Sometimes we see that accessing debt financing may not be the best decision for the business at the time, but being able to partner with others who want to provide capital or who may have some excess capital to support these businesses can be a great move. It was mentioned Facebook and Google and many of these businesses, but there are many young entrepreneurs within the Caribbean. There are some who are even tuned into this call. And one of my friends from Antigua, I know he's tuned into this. And if he's able to get access to additional capital to help his business thrive, I think it would make a marked difference in his business. Also looking at mentorship and support, because though we say that we are dependent a lot on persons out of the region, but I think mentorship and support and being able to leverage the right mentorship and support for businesses can make us much more resilient. So if there's anyone on this call who is interested in being connected with businesses where you can provide that mentorship and that support, we would welcome it, and we could share our contact information later so that we can make such a connection. And finally, for the type of support I think that would be valuable in helping to enhance our businesses and our private sector is with trade linkages. I think that wherever we are in the world, whether we're in the Caribbean or whether we're out of the Caribbean, we can make or we can contribute to the advancement of our region. So whether it's one simple decision such as linking someone, or whether it is promoting a business within the place that you are, or whether it is even just purchasing Caribbean products and having it and sharing the benefits of it with others, I think that support can really help to take our MSMEs and our private sector a long way. So I want to thank you for being able to share that. And if we move to the next slide, I hope that next one is there, which speaks to connecting our Caribbean to success. So at any point, anywhere that you are, just want to make that call to action and encourage you that there is something that each of us can do to make our Caribbean more resilient. We're speaking about Caribbean resilience today and post-pandemic recovery. It's not just up to someone else. It's not just up to the person, the government, or even just the private sector, or just these other people. I think it's up to all of us to actually contribute to making our Caribbean more resilient, whether in the way that we promote, we share, the connections that we make, how we speak about the Caribbean, and how we encourage each other can make a marked difference in helping us to move forward.
Thank you so much. Arceline, go ahead.
Yes, I want to take a moment to first of all thank you, Rosalind. You've done a fantastic job in moderating this conversation. It, believe it or not, is an hour and 25 minutes or so since we started, and so I wanted to just take a moment to quickly summarize, but hand it back to you to wrap up, and then end with, as everyone has said, and particularly Lizra, a call to action. So what we've talked about today through our fabulous guests, Justin Ram, Ingrid Riley, Lizra Fabian, and of course our host, or excuse me, our moderator, Rosalind McClement, that there are opportunities in the Caribbean. That yes, we are experiencing fallout from COVID-19 as we would any other disaster. I liken this to a hurricane. And on a certain level, we're prepared, and on another level, we may be less so. But I think what is evident is that we have an opportunity to engage those of us around the world that represent fellow Caribbean people. As I said at the top of this presentation, we are in the U.S. 4.4 million persons, according to the U.S. Census. We are sending $12 billion annually to the Caribbean, and it seems to me there's a tremendous opportunity to convert that into investment dollars as opposed to remittances to family and associates. I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. And so what we heard today, excuse me, is that there are at least 3 lanes we could be operating in. One is absolutely technology. How can technology facilitate this move towards resilience, whereby we ourselves in the Caribbean and those of us in the diaspora work together to bring about the realities that we want. Technology using, as Ingrid says, what we're good at, what we have, and not try to be the next Google of the Caribbean, if you will. And to Lizra's point, there are lots of businesses already. Her slide, she didn't have a chance to show this slide, but there are among the 21 chambers, I think that's actually a movie, 21 chambers, there are 90,000 MSMEs, 90,000 businesses in the Caribbean that are all, according to the CARICHAM organization, registered businesses. So we're not talking about, sort of rolling the dice, if you will. And as Justin indicated, there are other ways in which we can engage in investing. There are platforms out there, they leverage technology. And we ought to be looking at ways to do those things so that we can really own a piece of what goes on, and not, as many of our our family members have said, wait until we retire, particularly for those of us in the diaspora, to return home and make a difference. There are ways to do that today. And so I just want to say for myself, and then I will hand it back to Rosalind to wrap up our afternoon, is that firstly, I want to thank the guests again. I want to thank the attendees. We had quite a lot of attendees from all around the Caribbean, from the UK and from the US and Canada. So thank you again. I want to let you know that our organization intends to provide the means of connecting the dots. So whether that's events like this, where we enable the connections to be made by sharing information about what Ingrid's services are, or Lizra's, the chamber and her work, or Justin's organization, we intend to serve as a connector. But we also, as an organization, we provide, and I said this at the outset for those who missed it, we provide some very specific services. We are an incubator and accelerator, again, and we are supporting science and technology startups in the Caribbean. And we do that through our Innovation Prize, through training and support for startup founders, and also for championing startup growth. And we do that through these very specific programs of our Innovation Prize, our Founder Coach, Executive Volunteer program, and conferences. So I invite those of you who are attending here to reach out to me. You do have my email to get information about those things that you heard today. And to continue the conversation in ways that are fruitful and that move the needle. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Rosalind, so we can wrap up.
Thank you so much, Osline. It has been absolutely wonderful listening to my fellow Caribbean experts speaking. And thank you for putting this together, Osline. Now, all of you, as Osline said, you can connect with her to get addresses, how to reach each one of our presenters. Ingrid, the techie, Lizra, the entrepreneurship expert, and Justin with his financial prowess. And that the emphasis on education cannot be strong enough. If you look at the example of Singapore, the first thing Lee Kuan Yew did when he came in was stress Singapore. And look at Singapore today, which started out when most of our countries got their independence at the same time. So education, 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 opportunity, engage the diaspora, and stay in touch with Osline. And she will connect you, if you don't have the connections already, with Ingrid, Justin, and Lizra. So once again, thank you all. I'd like to give a little plug for this book, The Guyana Contract. If you want to look at, it's a novel, it's my third book actually, and talks about the influence of external corporations on the growth and the development of our infrastructure in our Caribbean region, specifically in Guyana, but applicable to all of the region. Again, Ms. Osline, thank you. Joey in the background making sure all of this happens. Thank you so much technically. And to our speakers, yes, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Lizra did not leave, she stayed. So that means that your questions, your attendance, audience was very valuable to her. Thank you so much. And until next time, take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye all. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye everyone. Take care.
Okay.